Hello everyone. Welcome to the presentation of the paper titled Alternative Assessment Practices in Higher Education During the COVID-19 Pandemic. In this paper, we have investigated the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on the higher education sector, especially the assessment practices in the higher education sector, what sort of impact that these COVID-19 related restrictions had on the assessment practices, the impact on academic and learning and teaching pedagogies, and also we have provided some recommended strategies to deal with it in the future. To start with, we all know that COVID-19 pandemic has had a huge impact around the globe in almost all sectors of life, including higher education sector. In terms of the higher education sector, in a lot of countries that especially the developing countries that did not have enough technological solutions or technology readily available, they completely shut down their learning and teaching institutes, and they are not delivering learning and teaching activities at all. Institutions who had access to, say, better technology or had technical tools available, online presence or online tools already available to them, they actually shifted to an online teaching environment. But even though the learning activities could be conducted online, one of the major problem with was the one of the major problem was to have invigilated exams. We all know that invigilated exam has had been a common practice, assessment practice around the globe for a very long time, because educators or academics popularly believe that they can reduce cheating. They can also encourage students to take preparation and have more long-term knowledge of concepts that are covered. So because there were restrictions on number of people that could be present within a certain area, with lockdowns around the globe, these invigilated exams could not take place, and they were replaced with alternative assessments. Uh, Although online courses have been running for a long time, and then those people who are teaching online, they already have experiences, and there is a vast literature available on online teaching and learning pedagogy and assessment practices for academics to look at. But usually when a course is running online, from the very beginning the academics can plan what they want to do, how they want to run their assessments, how they want to run their learning activities, and so on. But with this sudden impact of COVID-19 pandemic, educators did not have enough time to plan and react. So in many places, the semesters had already started. Academics have already started teaching their courses, already announced their assignments, and then so on. And then suddenly they had to shift to online class due to restrictions or limitations on number of people that can be in a certain area, and lockdown restrictions, right? So if we look at historical context that why these invigilated exams are preferred, so there was a study in 2007, and even in that study, they found that invigilated exams are very popular as a summative assessment tool, and then among the surveyed institution, in most of them, uh, invigilated exams were used as part of their assessment tool. The reason they and it is still continued even before the pandemic, and even after the pandemic it still continues to be one of the most popular form of summative assessment tool, that we do have an invigilated exam at the end of the semester where students are given questions, their behaviors are observed when they take the test, they have a limited time to complete the test, and then so on, right? um, the reason that academics prefer invigilated exam, it is due to there are there are argument of that it reduces the amount of cheating, the amount of contact cheating, academic misconduct, because you can observe them while they are taking the test. It is also a mandatory for some of the professional accreditation body that you have to have invigilated exams in order to get accredited. And some academics also argue that for long-term retention of concepts, it is important to have invigilated exam. But there are also views that are against this. Like for example, Article 7, it argues that the open book, open web exams are better than the traditional methods. They are better for testing students' knowledge. And in most cases, when you use an invigilated exam, you are only testing their memory, whether they can remember certain things or not, rather than application, right? Um, Even though there were views for having assessments, but in most cases invisibilated exams were still the favorite before the COVID-19 pandemic. So what happened as an impact of COVID-19 pandemic? So there was a study, interestingly, by Agnew and Hickson. They published the article in 2012. It was well before the COVID-19 pandemic. They wanted to see how online assessment can be more beneficial. So they considered a scenario that if there is an earthquake, at that time they had an earthquake at that institution. So for one of their courses, they wanted to see if there is an earthquake and if they want to convert their invigilated exam as an online assessment, how they can respond to that. And they found out that in their study that if you run online quizzes with time limit and some randomization, you could still get sort of a similar result, or you can still assess the students with similar as sort of assessments. So that was not as a impact of COVID-19, rather well before the COVID-19, to just to highlight the fact that if there is a natural disaster, what we can do. Interestingly, during COVID-19, there are multiple papers that looked at what are the strategies used in different institutions. One of the most important one was published by Slate. They conducted a survey with 70 course coordinators to see how they addressed alternative assignments in place of an invigilated exam. And they found out that across all of these 70 courses, there was no major changes in terms of assignment weights. Rather, in most cases, the face-to-face exam or the invigilated exam was converted to some equivalent online submission option. So either an online exam, either an online assignment, either just a traditional assignment, or just open web and open book test. And they also found out that the practice did not vary across disciplines. So, uh, you know, across different discipline, they all did the same thing. This thing happened because the academic world was not really prepared for such a pandemic, especially such a worldwide pandemic, and there was no plan in place on how to deal with this kind of a scenario. But the assessment practices that were used at the time, they were online assessment. So in terms of online assessment, these are essentially online quizzes, where the students are given certain time. The quiz remains open for a particular time window. The students must complete that quiz within that time window. So they are not really invigilated, rather it's just a time window given to students with just an online test. There were also online invigilated exam where the students had to use cameras. So they had to keep their cameras on the entire time they were giving the exam, and the academics was actually looking at those cameras. Obviously, it was a common practice in many of the developing countries, but it raises privacy concern, as well as it is extremely difficult for an academic to watch 100 students or maybe 50 to 60 students who are taking the exam and then looking at their cameras. There was also open book, open web test. So in this case, the students were allowed to use any kind of resources that they want to, but it was again a time test. There was also a traditional assignment where the students only submitted a report or a presentation or a video, but they did it in their own time and submitted within a deadline. So these are sort of assessment practices that we have seen all over the world. Now, moving forward, although the impact of most of the impact of COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdown restrictions are over, but as we move into the after COVID world, the online learning and teaching strategy is most likely to remain for a longer time. and we may have to go for a multi-mode deliveries in many cases. And also it provided us an opportunity to reflect on the fact that whether invigilated exams are the best tool to judge a student's skills and knowledge at the end of the semester. There are alternative options that can probably judge their analytical and critical thinking skills a lot better. But again, if a mandatory exams are absolutely essential, as mentioned in the beginning, that for some cases, say for accreditation purposes, there are mandatory exam requirement. So in that case, if something has to be online, there is an option of going into online open book, open web test. We can also use e-proctoring software where the browser is locked and the student is unable to move into another website to look at online material, but they can still use their open book test. We can allow single attempt, we can have time limit and randomized question pool. Again, with all of this technology available, if the student is at home and if they're not really invigilated, there is always an opportunity that they can use another device, they can talk to someone and things like that. But I guess it will depend on the assessment practices, that the kind of assessments that are set. So if the assessments are if the assessment encourages students to do critical thinking and problem solving with using the knowledge that they have learned throughout the course, it's more likely that students would be more interested to do them on their own. But again, with the introduction of new language models such as say ChatGPT, it becomes more challenging as well. Uh, but there has been studies that showed that open book test reduces the motivation to cheat, because we are asking the students that you can use any kind of materials that you want. It's basically a problem solving activity where they can use any materials that they want, but as long as they can solve the problem given to them. Take-home exams can be a good option as well. But again, as I mentioned, that tools like ChatGPT or newer language model, that they will impose a challenge. And then to respond to that challenges, as academics, we need to come up with strategies or assessment strategies where the assessments will require them to use practical skills and practical knowledge and more analytical skills and problem solving activities. So if we can create real life authentic assessments, it would be better it would be easier to assess students. Overall, moving to different assessment practices such as say professional presentations, oral interviews, bibliography, fact sheets, e-portfolio, most importantly things like say presentation, oral interview, or e-portfolio, even with language models like ChatGPT, you're most likely not be able to replicate those assignment, and then students have to do it on their own. So this can be the way forward. Also, authentic assessments with real life case studies will help to students achieve a higher level of standards according to the Bloom taxonomy. So we are not only going to assess whether they can remember things, rather we want to assess whether they can apply the knowledge or create new knowledge and things like that. So that's all from this, and here are a couple of references that were used in the paper. Thank you very much.